Hi everyone and welcome to my new video where we are setting up mud in my bullet journal. This was a fun theme to set up and a little bit different compared to my previous ones, as it's more colorful and I can't wait to hear what you think. Without further ado, let's get into my cover page. Or should I say let's march into it? Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, I was thinking about making another endometriosis related theme like I've done for the last 3 years, but it's quite difficult to create the same theme over and over again, so I needed a little break and ended up trying something different for a change. I will link my 2022 setup in the description in case you haven't seen it yet, so definitely go check that out. Anyway, I sketched out a lot of different ideas for this theme and randomly decided to draw a fish from a reference photo that I found on Unsplash, and that somehow looked the best from all the things I drew, so I decided to just go for it. I don't think I've never drawn a fish before, so this was a fun challenge for me as I would love to draw more things that I don't usually gravitate towards, and I think this turned out pretty cute in the end. Besides the fish, I also decided to draw these cherry or apple blossoms, I guess, just to fill up the empty space at the bottom, and I think combining random things like this together is always a good idea because it makes your illustrations more interesting and unique. So if you are struggling with coming up with theme ideas, definitely give it a try and see what happens. As always, I used my Pigma micron fineliners for the line art, and I think I used the size 05 for the main outlines and 01 for the finer details to give the line work more dimension. I think adding these lines on the fish tail and other parts that it uses for swimming makes all the difference and gives a nice movement to the fish because otherwise it would look a bit weird or blank. To make the line stand out from the main line art, I also used this kind of broken line style, so the fish tail would look a little bit more delicate as it's often kind of see-through. To make the flowers pop, I also added a bit of line shading in them, focusing on the center of the flower along with the top parts of the petals. This illustration might seem a bit more difficult than what it actually was, but I think that wasn't as complicated in the end once you get the sketch right. Like I said earlier, I used a reference photo of a real fish for this and made some tweaks in the way I drew the fish so it would look a little bit more simple and cartoon-like, as I prefer that style instead of a super realistic one. Anyway, for the coloring I decided to use just these colored pencils from Faber-Castell that I bought last year. You definitely don't need these many shades, and I think I ended up using maybe 8 pencils from this set. So if you are curious about the exact shades, I will write them in the description along with the other supplies that I used in this video. These pencils are quite expensive and you definitely don't need them for bullet journaling, as cheaper ones work really well too, and that's what I used in the beginning of my bullet journal journey as well. I think you can do a lot of different things just by using fine liners and a couple different colored markers or pencils, and if you have a notebook that can handle watercolors, the possibilities are basically endless because you can mix your own colors as well. Speaking about colors, I couldn't find suitable ones for my marker collection, so using colored pencils felt like a good idea because I could get a little bit softer look with them. I usually go for neutral colors like different shades of browns and pinks, but that didn't really work with this fish illustration as it looked very boring, so I decided to use just these colored pencils for my cover page to make it look a bit brighter and fun. I don't usually use blue at all, but I think it worked really well with the fish along with this kind of pink or slightly purple shade. And I used a very light pressure when I colored these illustrations so I could build up these colors slowly, and I think that's definitely a big bonus that colored pencils have compared to markers. To add more depth to this illustration, I added more color on the bottom of the fishtail and other areas that would have shadows, so this fish would look more three-dimensional. And I used pencils that were one shade darker than the ones I used earlier. I didn't color any of these illustrations completely, just because I like this more delicate and soft look, which also didn't feel like I'm doing something that is too much out of my comfort zone, if that makes sense. To make the fish a bit more pink instead of this very cool toned, more purple shade, I layered this rosy pink shade on top and also used that for the cherry or apple blossoms, so this whole illustration would look more cohesive. My sister actually pointed out that March is Pisces season, so I accidentally created a fitting theme for this month, I guess. I don't know much about different star signs or Pisces in general, but I would love to hear if there are any Pisces watching this video, and it would also be interesting to hear your star sign no matter what it is. I'm a Leo, but I've never really felt like that describes me well, because I'm definitely not outgoing, nor do I like to be in the center of attention. Anyway, I was a bit hesitant about using green for the leaves, because I again am afraid of bright colors, and I also wanted to have all the colors match well together. I ended up choosing this very light green, and I think it went well with the other colors and also made this cover look a little bit more spring-like, which I really liked. March is still a winter month here in Finland, as we often have snow until April or even May sometimes, but I'm really starting to miss the warmer weather, so I want to start embracing spring in my bullet journal a bit earlier. For the final touch, I added this gold border around the illustration because I felt like it really needed it, and I also like how some elements kind of branch out of the frame. I felt like the fish still needed something more, so I added some scales on its body to give it more life, and I actually did this after I had set up the rest of the spreads, so I had some time to process and think about whether I was happy with the cover or not. I highly recommend taking breaks from looking at your art so you can look at it with fresh eyes, because that really helps with defining if it's ready or needs something more. On the left side I made a simple quote page with a quote that goes like this: "Swim in your own direction." I really like this quote and it matched my fish theme well, so it was the perfect choice, and to keep things simple I just doodled these bubbles around it. Drawing these bubbles was fun, and I think they are great for filling in some empty space because they are so quick to draw and also go well with this kind of ocean vibe. Now let's move on to my monthly spread. I really liked using different colored papers in my February setup, so I decided to use this light bluish gray color for the monthly calendar and use the dots in my notebook to measure how much paper I needed to cut out. This color again is not what I usually go for, as it's very cool toned, but I think it went well with the other colors that I used for this theme. One of the reasons I decided to use slightly different color palette this month was actually the very superficial fact that I wanted my nail polish to match my theme and didn't want to paint my nails again, so I guess this was a good way to force myself out of my comfort zone to try out something different. I don't know if this theme even feels that different for you, because the colors are still very light, but for me it was a big change and something I've been needing to do, as I feel like I've put myself in a very small box artistically, if that makes sense, and haven't been experimenting that much in the last year or so. When you stay in your comfort zone for too long, it gets very boring, and one of my art goals this year is to start trying out new things so I could challenge myself a little bit more. Anyway, I used a white gel pen to draw the calendar because black pen would have looked a bit too bold, and I'm also going to be using a black pen to fill in the calendar, so the white grid won't look as busy. I wanted to have a bit more writing space for brainstorming random ideas, so I made a slightly smaller calendar this time and decorated the bottom of the spread with this fish doodle. Here you can see how I usually sketch my illustrations, and I always start with the basic shape and then add the details. I also erase a lot to get the look I want, and in this case, for example, I first drew a little bit too wide head for the fish, so I changed it to a thinner one. The reason why I don't usually show you the sketching process is that it's a lot easier and quicker to film these videos when I've already sketched out the spreads. But let me know if you would like to see that more, as I can definitely try to include more sketching in the future. So maybe leave a pen emoji in the comments if that's something you would like to see. I didn't really look at reference photos for this illustration because it's just so simple, but I think I should have added something to the head, like maybe spots or scales, as it ended up looking a bit weird and ghost-like, but that's fine, and at least I know now what I can do better next time. If you have any ideas on what I should draw on my next themes, I would love to hear them. I was actually thinking about drawing people for my theme at first, but that ended up being too challenging for me because I haven't drawn people in ages, and I think people are one of the most difficult things to draw, at least for me. Maybe I will do that later this year, but we will see, as it will take a lot of practice and patience, which I don't always have. Fish, for example, are quite easy to draw, and animals in general are way easier for me because it's easier to draw them in a less realistic style. Anyway, I didn't end up having that much writing space for brainstorming, but I think this will do, as I have quite small handwriting and I can always add some kind of flip out if I need some extra space. I decided to add this golden frame again, just to give a little bit more structure to this illustration, and I really like how it looks. I used my Uniball-signo gel pen this time instead of a jelly roll because it's running out of ink and I haven't found a new one here in my hometown. This gel pen is a little bit brighter and more yellow, but it isn't as shiny as the jelly roll. I decided to change up this whole monthly spread layout because I felt like I needed something fresh and new. I used this bluish grey paper for the weekly planning section and made it horizontal this time, so I will have a little bit more writing space. I also rounded the corners for these papers with my corner cutter, so they look a little bit softer, and I think I used the 4mm side of the cutter for that. On the empty right side I decided to draw the cherry blossoms again, but you could also use this space for habit tracking, which I was considering doing, but then realized that I couldn't fit all the habits I wanted to track on this spread, so I ended up making a separate spread for trackers instead. By the way, if you need some more spread or theme ideas, go watch a video where I flip through my sister's bullet journal if you haven't seen it yet. Setting up a bullet journal for someone else and fitting the whole year in one notebook was a bit challenging, but it was also a fun project and I did a lot more simple spreads and themes for that, which was a good challenge as well. I think it's always better if you do your own bullet journals though, as then you can change things up a lot more and find layouts that are perfect for your own needs. I've got some comments on TikTok where people say that they did their own bullet journal wrong or something after seeing my video, and it honestly makes me a bit sad because we all have our own ways of journaling and I don't think you can necessarily do it wrong. I mean, you can and probably will make spreads that don't end up working for you or you don't like, or you might even draw something you don't like. But that's not wrong because it's just part of the process, and I believe that we all have to go through that, especially in the beginning, and I still go through that sometimes. Bullet journal is much more than just the aesthetics, and it doesn't even have to be artsy or aesthetic. For me, a bullet journal is a helpful tool and a way to check in with myself, like how I'm doing and how I'm feeling. And it's also a place where I write down some memories so I remember them years later. And because I also enjoy drawing, it's a place where I explore my creativity. Anyway, that was a long rant and I still have a lot of thoughts about this, but let's leave it there. I would love to hear your thoughts on this and what's the reason why you bullet journal if that's something you do as well. Next, I'm setting up my tracker spread and I was finally able to figure out my printer settings in a way that I was able to print this 5mm grid paper that I used for my happy trackers. I just crossed off the extra days so it will be easier to fill in, and I will always fill my habit tracker with a little dot so crossing them off doesn't mess that up. I think a light grey color might have worked a little bit better in the end instead of this page that I use, but what is done and I think this worked out just fine in the end. By the way, I'm not going to write the habits that I'm tracking in this video this time because I want to be a little bit more intentional with the things I'm tracking and want to do some self-reflection before I choose which habits are relevant at this time. It's easy to just go on this kind of autopilot mode where you just repeat familiar things without thinking, so I think it's sometimes good to stop and reflect to see if the familiar thing is still working as well as it used to. For the decorations, I decided to draw these fish again because they fit the empty space perfectly, and I don't actually know which species these are. I guess the reference photo that I used on the cover page was maybe a petafish, but I'm not completely sure. This time I decided to color the tail and other parts blue just for a change, and I first colored the body with a brown color so it would fit the shade of the grid paper better, but I ended up going over that with a pink later. For the mood tracker I used some same paper as for the monthly spread, and this time I drew the grid with a blue colored pencil to get a little bit softer look, and I also learned from my mistakes last month and used a ruler this time. In case you are new here, the way this tracker works is that I will draw one or multiple doodles that describe my mood and draw those in the daily boxes. This works a lot better for me than trackers that you have to color in, because I can choose multiple moods for one day and it's just a lot easier to fill as I don't need a ton of different pens for that. At this point I felt like this spread needed something more, so I decided to add these gold lines on the top and bottom parts of the spread to make it a little bit more balanced, as I had a lot more space on the bottom. I think this was the right choice, and it was also really quick to do, which was a nice bonus. This spread ended up looking a little bit more blue compared to my previous ones, but I think it turned out okay still. Anyway, let's move on to my weekly spread, and I again decided to set up all my weeklies in this same dot store layout, but I used a horizontal layout this time just for a change. I think I cut the page from the 12th dot, if that makes sense, so I can use a couple different layouts for my weeklies. I also used my X-Acto knife to cut the page near the binding, because using it was a bit easier compared to using scissors. Just be very careful if you do this so you don't accidentally cut the notebook's binding. I wanted to keep the spread more on the simple side because I drew a lot in the previous pages, so I decided to make a little collage for the decorations. I tore a couple different kinds of papers for this, so I would have different textures, and also used the same grid paper for the mini calendar. I've been really enjoying making collages lately, especially in my travel journal, and I posted a new video about that a couple weeks ago, so definitely go check that out if you haven't seen it yet. I've been also making memory spreads in my bullet journal near the end of the month, and that has been really fun too. After I was done with writing and the collage, I decided to use the same tracing paper technique that I used last month, and here you can see the tracing paper that I used. I think you could also use vellum paper for this, but I just couldn't find it anywhere, so I've been using this tracing paper instead, and it works really well. I just traced this fish doodle from the previous page on it, and it was super quick and easy because I could just jump straight into the line art and skip the coloring part. This is kind of like making your own transparent sticker with a minimal effort and supplies, and I think it works really well, especially on the top of collages. After I was done with the tracing, I just cut out the fish and left some paper near the outlines because it was easier to cut that way. Then I just played around with the placement a little bit to see which position looked the best and glued the piece of paper on top of the collage. I used a glue stick for that because you could see the glue tape through the paper, and this was basically it for the decorations, and next we can move on to the layout itself. I decided to use this grid paper for some of the boxes, and I think I got this idea from Bloom and Dot or Tina's Diary, and I will link both of their channels in the description so you can check them out. For the other boxes I used a gold gel pen, and I think it ended up looking really pretty. This spread ended up looking quite yellow toned with all these papers, but I think it's okay, and I can always use the blue paper for the other weeklies if I would like to. I felt like the collages needed something more, so I added these circle stickers in there, which are from Sleepy House Lion, and I will link the shop in the description. Lisa makes super cute stickers, so definitely go check out her shop, especially if you like cats. Anyway, I felt like this spread needed a little bit more black, so I used my Tombow fudenosuke pen for writing out the days of the week, and I just realized that I forgot to write the date numbers in the boxes. So I will definitely do that later because otherwise I will be very confused. Now it's time for the final flip through. I think this theme turned out really cute, and it definitely challenged me in a good way. It's a little bit different compared to my usual style, so I'm a bit nervous how it will do. But I like it, and that's all that matters. I would love to hear what you think of this theme, and I hope you got some new ideas or inspiration from this video. Remember to leave a like and a fish emoji in the comments if you enjoyed this video and made it till the end. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye bye!